For decades, Eritrea's voice at the United Nations General Assembly was a predictable roar, defiant, bitter, and aimed squarely at the West, especially the United States. Each year, Asmara's representatives would decry American hegemony and paint Eritrea as a proud nation under siege. This performance was a cornerstone of Eritrean foreign policy, a public declaration of its fiercely independent stance. But this year, the roar faded to a whisper, almost total silence. Foreign Minister Osman Saleh took the podium, but the usual fire was gone. No accusations, no condemnations, no mention of sanctions, just broad philosophical themes about global injustice. The omission was glaring, leaving diplomats and analysts stunned. For a country built on resistance and outspoken criticism, this sudden reticence was a political event in itself. The silence prompted immediate speculation. Was this a thaw or a tactical maneuver? The world was left to wonder what was truly happening behind the closed doors of one of Africa's most secretive states. To understand Eritrea's quiet diplomacy in 2025, you have to remember its past sound and fury. The UN General Assembly was once Eritrea's main stage for denouncing the United States, accusing it of containment and destabilization. Eritrean officials regularly cited sanctions and border disputes as evidence of American hostility. Their speeches were filled with phrases like unjust sanctions and hegemonistic designs, casting Eritrea as David against Goliath. President Isaias Afwerki's government made defiance its brand, using the UN podium to detail grievances and rally against Western pressure. This approach won few friends in the West, but cemented Eritrea's reputation as unyielding. The world came to expect finger-pointing at Washington every year. The absence of this act in 2025 forced everyone to reconsider Eritrea's motives. The contrast between past fire and present silence is what makes this shift so fascinating. Eritrea's silence is measured against a long tradition of confrontation. When Foreign Minister Osman Saleh took the stage at the 80th UN General Assembly, observers braced for the usual fireworks. Instead, his address was calm, academic, and free of the familiar anger. He spoke of global economic injustice, not American interference. The United States, long cast as Eritrea's villain, wasn't mentioned at all. This was more than a softening. It was a strategic pivot. Eritrea gave the US and its allies nothing to react to. No inflammatory quotes, no diplomatic incidents. The silence on US relations became the main talking point for regional watchers. It was a subtle but seismic move, leaving only questions in its wake. Why the sudden change? What message was Asmara sending? The silence of September 2025 signaled a fundamental shift in Eritrea's approach to the world. As soon as the Eritrean speech ended, the UN corridors buzzed with speculation. Diplomats and journalists were stunned by the lack of confrontation. One European diplomat called it the most constructive Eritrean speech they'd ever heard. Analysts quickly agreed. Eritrea's silence was strategic, not accidental. The US delegation offered no comment, fueling intrigue. Theories swirled. Was this a thaw or a calculated move ahead of regional negotiations? The consensus. Such a dramatic shift could only come from President Isaias himself. The world scrambled to decode what Eritrea's new quiet meant for the Horn of Africa. Eritrea's quiet at the UN is deeply tied to the tense politics of the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia's push for seaport access has made Eritrea wary, especially as relations have cooled since the Tigray conflict. Picking a fight with the US now would be strategically unwise. Eritrea can't afford isolation if regional tensions escalate. The crisis in Sudan adds more volatility, demanding careful diplomacy. In this chessboard of shifting alliances, Eritrea needs flexibility, not enemies. Open confrontation with the US would limit options and risk pushing Washington toward Eritrea's rivals. Silence preserves diplomatic maneuverability. Eritrea's real threats are now regional, not global. The silence is a redeployment of resources for the battles that matter most, close to home. Eritrea's softer tone is also about economic survival. Years of sanctions have crippled its economy and deepened isolation. Public defiance hasn't changed the reality. Eritrea needs investment and relief. By muting criticism, Asmara signals openness to engagement and possibly sanctions relief. A moderate tone could win sympathy from the non-aligned movement and African Union and make it harder to paint Eritrea as a pariah. Eritrea wants leverage in international forums and a seat at the table in regional security talks. Presenting a reasonable face is a strategic play to re-enter global diplomacy. The goal, to be seen as a stakeholder, not a spoiler. Eritrea's Red Sea coastline is both its greatest asset and vulnerability. The region is a magnet for global and regional powers: US, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, all vying for influence. In this crowded arena, blanket hostility toward the US is risky. Eritrea's softer rhetoric may signal willingness to cooperate on maritime security, counter-piracy, or navigation. With Ethiopia's ambitions for sea access, Eritrea needs powerful friends, or at least neutrality from the US. A less antagonistic relationship could deter Ethiopian aggression. The new tone is also about attracting investment from Gulf states, who are wary of US-sanctioned countries. Eritrea is signaling it's open for business and working to de-risk its political environment. It's a move to unlock the economic potential of its strategic location. Despite the new tone, core disagreements between Eritrea and the US remain, especially on human rights. Indefinite national service, lack of press freedom, and political prisoners keep Eritrea isolated and sanctioned. The UN recently renewed its human rights mandate for Eritrea, which Asmara fiercely opposes. Eritrea accuses the US of double standards, seeing human rights as a political tool. Decades of suspicion won't vanish with one quiet speech. Eritrea's government is unlikely to make major reforms just to please Washington. The change is external strategy, not internal policy. The chasm over rights and freedoms remains as wide as ever. As the dust settles, the question remains: is Eritrea's silence a real pivot or just a tactical pause? A genuine shift could open doors to sanctions relief and investment, stabilizing the region. But skepticism is warranted. Isaias Afwerki's regime is known for strategic cunning. The softer tone may be a short-term tactic to buy time or achieve specific goals. The US response will be critical. Ignore the signal, and Eritrea may revert to old habits. Reciprocate, and a cautious dialogue could begin. Only time will tell if this is fleeting pragmatism or a new chapter. The world will watch for further signals from Asmara. For now, Eritrea has captured attention, not with a roar, but with a whisper.